Jane Lewis, welcome to the Centre for Healing podcast.
Thank you,
Or
Ryan.
should I call you J-Lo?
Jailu.
I was just saying, Jane is we're going to get into your story in a minute, an ADHD specialist and coach, but your business is called J-Lu HQ, and you
It
just
is
filled me in of
indeed.
why I was J-Lu. I love it. I love it. Can you tell the listeners, we're going to talk all about ADHD today, neurodivergence, RSD, and I've forgotten the acronym already, but you'll fill us in a minute. And obviously trauma, because it wouldn't be a Centre for Healing podcast without us talking about trauma. But this is an issue, not an issue, like a topic or a subject that's come up in our community so much in the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, is ADHD and neurodivergence, particularly in adults and adult diagnosis. So before we dive into this topic, can you just let people know a little bit about you, what you're doing in your life today, who you work with your coaching and everything, and then we might sort of veer into how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose my previous life, I worked for many years in corporate and in learning and development. I was an exec coach for quite a few years. And then my son got diagnosed with ADHD quite early on. And we went through a lot of challenges with him. And I can remember feeling like something was different, not necessarily wrong, but different. And I can remember a lot of people kind of judging me on that. And I was saying, well, I'm not saying that there's something wrong. I just knew. So, yeah, he got diagnosed with ADHD. And then I went to town just learning everything that I could because I just thought,
As you
need to
do.
put my big girl, yeah, as you do. But I just thought, big girl pants on. Come on, let's like treat this as a something to be not solved, but just helped. And how can I help this situation rather than seeing it as a deficit or a problem? What can I do about it? So, spent a couple of years doing that. We did some beautiful psychology programs. I remember I had a doctor friend that said to me, "Do you not think you're selfish not putting him on meds?" And I said, "Well, I'll explore everything else." And it was really interesting because we did some beautiful psych programs that had amazing results. And so focusing on the positive and really connecting in and all of this stuff and learning about it. So, yeah, a couple of years in. And then I remember a pediatrician said to me, "Do you think it runs in the family?" And I laughed and I said, "Well, it wouldn't be their father." And, and even though I said it in jest, as the months rolled on, I was like, "Oh, I wonder if I've got this ADHD thing." So, yeah, I was diagnosed myself, which was really interesting because by the time I got to the diagnosis, I knew it, but even that kind of official naming, I suppose, was still quite a big thing. It was a big shift. I went through this big relief phase, recontextualizing. And then I also thought, so I was doing my exec coaching, I was a qualified mindfulness teacher, which is all about the prefrontal cortex as well, and engaging that prefrontal cortex, giving yourself more space. So then I thought, why not learn the whole ADHD side from a coaching standpoint and so deeply? Because those things together, the exec coaching, the mindfulness, and the ADHD side, could really roll in and help that ADHD community. So I did about 18 months intense training through ADCAR, and through that process, I just fell in love with my community. And I just thought, this is where I want to be. This is the space where I can do the best work. So, yeah, that was a good few years ago. And here I am today.
And
Yeah.
so you're
So,
working with mainly adults who have a diagnosis of
mainly
ADHD?
adults. Yeah, I do a little bit of parent coaching. I don't really coach kids. There are people that are trained in family and coach kids. I guess one of my philosophies is that often it's the parents that need the coaching. And quite often, when a parent comes to me and says, "I need my child this to change," I say to them, "Well, if you want me to, I'll coach you. You're in the house with them 24/7." And what they learn through the coaching process often is that they needed to change a bit, right? They needed to change their understanding, their communication, and all of that stuff to change the environment to suit the strengths of the child. So sometimes it's not the child that needs coaching, sometimes it is, but somebody has to be willing to come to coaching. And they have
Yeah,
to want to see the change or get whatever it is out of the coaching rather than somebody else wanting it for them, if that makes sense.
it does. Do you get resistance in some of the parents when you sort of come with that suggestion?
Mm, occasionally. I mean, I've had seen such good success with parent coaching, but if they still want to change their child, then I'll suggest that they go, family coaching or something like that. Do I get resistance? Not usually, but it just depends what space people are in. I mean, I can remember when my child was really, really small and I wasn't in a positive space around it. I was confused. I didn't know what was happening. So I think everybody's in a different space at a different time.
That's true. I would see like at the center, we would have a lot of addiction clients, and a lot of them were younger, like maybe teenage, early 20s, and that kind of thing. And I guess you would get some parents who were like, yes, we want to work with this person, help them through what they're going through and understand the reasons why. But there's also a dynamic, within the family and everything. And we'd want to do work with them, and we'd find some people would be really open to that. Like, yes, let's come in. I know I can be better and do this. But then you get some parents who it was kind of like, well, no, they're the one that's got the problem. I'm using air
Yes.
quotes, or they're the one that's broken. You need
Yes.
to fix them and send them back to be fixed. And so there's
Yes.
no ownership there of maybe their role in the dynamic.
Absolutely. And I've only had one client actually in all of the years that I can think of. And I think she said, I thought that you were going to be there to nag my child.
Yeah.
And we very respectfully both ways, just parted both ways, but that's been one in many years. Yeah, most. And I think if you explain what coaching is as well, they get it. It's like a strength-based thing. It's not to say that there's some deficit in your child that we need a problem to be fixed necessarily. So I think that when you explain well what coaching is, then they can decide, are they in that space for that? Is it right for them or not?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you touched on something in your story. You went over it really quickly, but I wouldn't mind just spending a little bit of time there. You said that you had a doctor tell you as a mother, don't you feel selfish for not putting your son on medication? What was that like for you? What was that like to, I guess, experience, but also decide you wanted to move forward in spite? Because sometimes we can, if it's a doctor, a lot of people have that, that person of authority, maybe I am being selfish, your mum guilt kicks in and all that. How'd you navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I probably felt a mix of feelings. There was probably a part of me that thought, oh gosh, should I be listening to this person? Like, how much do I really know? But there was a bigger part of me that trusted my gut, I think. And I just thought, I'm not ruling it out. But what I'm saying is that just because somebody in authority tells me that this is what I need to do for my child, give me a reason why.
Mm,
So I always go to, and this is the same when a parent says to me, do you think I should put my child on medication, or my child's on medication, they're not dealing well with it? I always say to them, well, what's the purpose? That is the first thing we want to do. Because I have had people come to me and say that the psychiatrist just diagnosed them and then gave them meds, but we don't know what the purpose for the meds was. What intensity was the ADHD? Where was it a challenge in their life? Where was it a strength? And meds work for a lot of people, but not everybody. But when we're putting it in context of a child, I think it's important to understand, what does the child need it for? Now, my kid was completely hyperactive. He got asked to leave two different swimming pools, swimming lessons, because he couldn't sit on the edge. He would just keep throwing himself in, and he wasn't, the stimulation. And it looked to the outside world like he was being naughty, but he just couldn't process all the
mm,
noise and being told what to do in a group setting. And then there was this one swimming pool, and they said to us, we'll give him one-on-one sessions for the same cost, which was just so beautiful. That was what he needed. Does that make sense? It's like he didn't need medication to. And the other part was the emotional and the impulsiveness. He needed those positive psychology courses, I guess. And I sat down and did them with him and taught him perspective taking. Well, it's not all or nothing. So when you feel like this always happens, does it always happen? Let's look at the differences. And we also got told to focus 80% on the positives and 20% on the negatives. So as a parent, you jump to the negative mostly,
mm.
right? It's just like, you shouldn't have done that. Whereas we just quietened down on the negatives and we turned up those, wow, I loved it when I saw you do that. When I saw you do that, this is what it did for your brother. And it just turned him into a different kid. He was just I got called by the school once about him, and I thought, oh God, what's going to happen? And they said, I just wanted to tell you the leadership qualities that were displayed because another kid hit him, and this is the way that he dealt with it. And that was through a couple of years of just this positive psychology and just this providing the environment. Well, he doesn't feel psychologically safe in that environment. So no wonder he's acting up, because if you put him in a different environment, he's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I literally was going through a lot of the comments on our courses and everything this morning before we jumped on. And one of our courses, we were talking, like a lot of our courses, about the importance of safety and being able to regulate, and being in an unsafe environment is going to make anybody change their behavior to a degree, because we're talking fear-based. And they said, for those with ADHD and neurodiversity, they said, so in the environment, when they're younger, are they more easily dysregulated? And it's kind of like, well, yes, with more, I guess, sensitivity to the sensory input we have in our environment, then that's possible. But they said, then if you have the caregivers creating more of an unsafe environment, does that trigger more of the bad behavior? It's like this cycle. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. The more unsafe someone feels, the more their symptoms and behaviors are going to get worse, the more it's going to trigger the people that we're there with. And those people, if they don't have a real, because that's a difficult situation, right, firsthand, that's a difficult situation. It takes someone to have really, I think, high capacity and emotional intelligence in that moment to be able to break that negativity loop, because most people we react. And so we're reacting to them, they're reacting to us in the environment, and we're completely stuck in a loop at that point.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And that it makes me think of I was parent coaching this lady with her 11-year-old boy, and he had oppositional defiance, and he'd been suspended from school, etc., etc. And he got to me after seeing, I think it was 11 different specialists. And I said to him, the first thing I said, he walked in the room and I said, can you find the light switch? Because I don't know where it is. And I was honestly being honest. And it just put him in this state of like, well, that's weird. But he found the light switch, and then he felt kind of calm and like his strengths. So we went through things, and we went through the classes that he was told off in and that he got suspended. I said, are there any classes where you're not like that? And the teacher is, you're cool with the teacher. Oh, yeah, he said, my science class, I love Mrs. So-and-so. And Mrs. So-and-so loved him. And it was like, isn't that interesting? He feels psychologically safe in that environment. So the behaviors, because behavior is a symptom of a source, right? A behavior is absolutely the symptom of a source. And you guys work with that all of the time.
Yeah, it's like, even that light switch example. It's like I come into this environment, it's like, oh, I'm of value here. I'm seen and
Yes.
I'm of value. Whereas
Yes.
if I'm being told constantly, and I know this from personal experience, stop doing that, stop being that way, then all I'm getting is that negativity. And so that's going to make me inherently more on edge and feel less valuable as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't faking it either. You can't fake it with kids. I actually couldn't find the light switch, but I knew that if he could find the light switch, that would bring him into that, like you say, the feeling valued. And we did his strengths as well in that session. We sat there for 2 hours and we did his strengths, and we talked about how his ADHD made him stronger, whereas everywhere else he had been this kind of conveyor belt of what's wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's breaking that, I think. And you'll see how resilient kids are, and adults, when they're not in a space where they're constantly being told their weaknesses and what they're bad at and what they're good at.
Oh, it's just, yeah, that people with ADHD, they come quite often hoping for strategies and tactics for the shoulds. I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And I find through coaching that half the work, what they come out with is actually, I'm okay with me. I'm
Yeah.
okay with doing that. I'm okay with hanging my washing up on, talking about me in particular, on my balcony and not out on the washing line because I can see it. It's tangible. I won't forget it.
I love that. I love that. You spoke a little bit about your diagnosis. I wouldn't mind getting your opinion on that, but also when you've seen other, particularly adults, get their diagnosis of ADHD or neurodiversity of
Mm.
some type. You spoke about the term relief. Like relief is something that I've seen, not just with this, but with a diagnosis in general. There's kind of a deep breath, and like we hate as human beings not knowing. It's like, I know
Yes.
there's an issue in my life, but I don't know what it is. And people have told me, let's say that the doctor or authority have told me I don't know what it is. So I think there's a relief there when we get the diagnosis. Do you see any other emotional states or things come up for people?
For sure. Yeah, there's quite a bit of, I think, in that recontextualizing, relief is usually a really big one, not for everybody. It's a really big one. It's like, oh, everything falls into place now. Now I understand. And in that, actually, I have quite a few clients. It's not unusual to go through things like depression diagnosis, anxiety, some even bipolar, and this emotional dysregulation. And when they finally get to the ADHD, they're like, everything makes sense now. So a lot of relief, sometimes anger. So if my parents had picked this up when I was a kid, or occasionally, my parents knew this, but they didn't tell me. But then you get the other way as well. You can get somebody, my parents put me on meds and they shouldn't have done. So you can get all varying responses. But I think anger, sadness is a big one. How different would my life have been if I'd have known? So, and I mean, for me personally, if I think how different would my life have been if I'd known, I probably look at that on the inverse of if I'd have been diagnosed in my 20s, there was such a stigma around it that how do I know that wouldn't have actually knocked my confidence and made me feel that I was different? Or so by the time I got my diagnosis, I'd already worked my way through a really wonky childhood, teenage, and into an adult that was able to climb to the top of mountains. So would I have been able to do that if I'd have known in my 20s? I don't know. I don't know the answer. But most people do look back a bit and go, how would my life have been different? So I actually have on my intake form, I've got tick boxes of all of the emotions that they feel coming in from a diagnosis. And is there anything else? Because some people feel neutral, but most people feel, yeah, upset, relief, anger, sadness are probably the biggest ones that people,
Yeah.
and it's a process. Some days is great, and other days something takes you. It's a bit like trauma, right? It's a bit like grief. Some days it takes a hold of you and you remember a situation and you have a little cry and move through.
Yeah, I guess it's acknowledging that and then that's pretty normal, but then also not wanting to stay there, like not wanting to stay in blame or going things
Yes.
should have been different. Like that's I always tell clients if they start saying should or shouldn't, I'm like, don't swear at me. I'm
Same.
like, you
Yeah.
can say shit, fuck, whatever you want. That's not swearing to me, but should and
Yeah.
shouldn't is because
Yeah.
you're implying that reality should or shouldn't be a certain way when that's, wrestling with reality. We're not going to win that one. So
No.
ideally getting to the point where you were, where it's like, yeah, look, if I got my diagnosis earlier, like, who knows what I would have done? It might have been a positive, might have been a negative. We don't know because it's not in
Yeah.
reality. I get sometimes if I'm on a podcast, it's a classic question. I'll get to the end of the show and go, if you could go back and talk to your, 20-year-old self, what would you say? I'm like, nothing, because he wouldn't fucking listen to me.
Same. Absolutely true, isn't it? Yeah.
I could have the
Yeah.
most profound words to say, but he would not have listened one word.
No, no. And we are who we are and we're where we are because of those things that have happened.
Yeah. Why do you think that the diagnosis of adult ADHD has really exploded in the last probably 5 or so years?
Yeah. Honestly, there could be a few different reasons, but my main thoughts around it are that it's becoming into more awareness of what ADHD actually is rather than just an impulsive, fidgety kid. That because I get so many people, especially women, coming in diagnosed saying, I had no idea. When somebody suggested it to me, all I could think was, but I'm not fidgety and impulsive and these types of things. And there's three different types. There's inattentive, there's hyperactive, and there's combined. But the inattentive shows up incredibly differently to the typical
How
stigma.
so?
So okay, so the inattentive, you probably wouldn't notice that somebody had ADHD unless you know about the inattentive, because it would show up more as forgetfulness, daydreaming, away with the fairies, but it's quite often a more placid nervous system. So interestingly, I think it was Russell Barkley, they're arguing to get emotional regulation into the DSM for ADHD. And I think it was Russell Barkley said, except for inattentives. So my oldest son is diagnosed inattentive and he's completely different kettle of fish to my youngest who bounces off the walls. But I'm not sure he's ever taken a bath plug out in his life.
Yeah.
He's 13 and he stands at the shower going, Mom, can I have a towel? he doesn't remember a towel every time when he goes into the
Yeah.
bathroom. And so for inattentives, it's usually motivation that's more of an issue. Whereas, say you've got the hyperactive side, the hyperactive is sort of the hypervigilant, the nervous system's overactive. You might be talking a lot. You've got the combined type, so you might be more impulsive, more emotionally dysregulated, and then the combined type is both. So you might be distracted, forgetful, but you'll also have that hyperactive side. The positives, I think the positives about the inattentive side is that they don't typically have that emotional dysregulation. Not everyone, in general.
Mhm.
And the positives about the hyperactive side, I think, is, oh boy, can we get
Yeah.
stuff done?
I was about to ask which one was your diagnosis, but I've got a fair idea.
Oh, do you? Go on, Ryan, take a guess.
The hyperactive?
It's actually both.
Right, yeah, actually, yeah, okay, okay. Because you had to speak about the
Yeah,
forgetfulness. Yeah, I think
I am so
I've
scattered.
never got a diagnosis, but I've got my assumptions. I'd be probably the hyperactive type.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like if you've got your mind set on something, you will be so tenacious. Like I remember when I worked in the corporate world and they thought that I was so tenacious and I'd get stuff done, but I'd always be hiding that in the background, my systems were a mess. They were just like, it's like, don't look in my drawers in the computer sense because I
Yeah.
don't even know where everything
Just
is.
look on the surface. Just look, enjoy this part. Don't delve any deeper.
Yeah, and I was great with the people. I was great with the once I'm plugged in and present, great with the people side, but the system side and the admin side would all fall by the wayside. So yeah, there's three different types. So I guess to come back to your question, why do I think it's exploded? I think that there's so many different nuances that weren't known before. So nobody would have sat there and gone, "Oh, I think I might have ADHD. Let me go get it tested." I also think that ADHD used to be seen as like a real disorder. Sort of, it's only for those people that it would be obvious, rather than the way that I look at it is it's a different operating system. It's like we talked about that Mac and that PC earlier, didn't we? So it's like, are you a Mac or are you a PC? And I think that for many people, they've been operating with as a neurotypical brain in an ADHD system. And that's probably also why they felt square peg round hole. But once they understand that it's a system difference, if you like, they can start to understand how their system works better. So yeah, I don't think it's exploding because more ADHD is suddenly being created. I don't know. I mean, there's things like food preservatives that absolutely bring it out
Yeah,
worse.
social media, phones.
Phones and social media are an interesting one because I think that they can give the symptoms of ADHD. The
Mm.
amount of people that I've heard that are quite clearly neurotypical that say, I think I've got a bit of ADHD. That's
Just a
actually
little
quite offensive.
sprinkle.
Yeah, a little sprinkle, but it does offend quite a few people who do have ADHD because it's like you're saying you don't understand the real challenges, the actual neurobiological differences. So, yeah, I think that it is a case of us understanding more about ADHD, which is making people go, wow, wow, that's me.
Is that one of the places that you start? Let's say if you take on a new client, is helping them understand. It's like, hey, you've been trying to use a Mac, this is your reference, but trying to use a
Mm,
Mac, but actually this is the operating system over here that we're using. It's Windows. So we need to first look at that and acknowledge it and find out what's going to work for them.
absolutely. Yeah. And each coaching session, they'll come in with a different topic and they'll say, why can't I stay on focus or what's happening for me? I say I had somebody the other day and it was the person that I'm with gets frustrated because I trail off mid-sentence. I just kind of, and I said, okay, what's happening internally for you when you trail off mid-sentence? And she said, ah, my thoughts are going faster than my mouth. So my thoughts have already moved on. So through that, we find out through that ADHD operating system that our thoughts do, they overlay quicker, they move on faster. I had another guy in a similar vein, and he said, my wife gets really annoyed with me because I get the cats and dogs names wrong. Or yeah, I said, well, how much interest is in the cats and dogs name? He said, oh, so boring. So his brain's already moved somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something a little
Don't
more
really care
interesting.
about it. So it's like through that process of what are your actual issues, what are your challenges, what do you need to understand, we then understand about the ADHD system, and then we figure out what is the motivation to change it. There might be none. And that's where that kind of the shoulds come in. There was a guy I had last year, absolutely beautiful to watch him go through his journey. And I remember the first session he came in and he said, I feel so much shame because I don't take my keys out of the house. I said, what do you mean? He said, I've lived in this place for a year and I don't take my keys out of the house in the morning and I leave my front door open. I said, well, do you live in a safe area? He said, yeah, I do. I said, well, if you know that you're going to, oh, because that was the issue. He said, I lose my keys all the time. I leave them places, have to get new ones cut. I said, well, if you know that that's the way that your brain works, could it be that you're using your wisdom, leaving your keys in the house and leaving your front door open? He said, I never thought of that. He said, I just think normal people take their keys out of the house. And that's that kind of
The comparison to
yeah,
normal in air quotes.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's that, yes, that's that understanding of your system. Some things are always going to be this way if this is the way that my brain works. So do I want to change it? Or do I want to just have radical acceptance that, yes, I am completely scatty in that way. I will always leave my bag at the cafe. So just don't take your valuables out, you know.
Yeah.
Or do I want to put scaffolding in place to change it? And I think that that's what we figure out with them as well. It's like, what's more authentic to you? And if you do want to change it, then we put scaffolding in place. But if you're actually okay with that, then let's get you okay with being authentic.
Yeah, yeah. I think I told this to you last time we caught up and chatted on Zoom, but like I had a thing where when we started the business, Melissa, the first couple of times it happened because we'd have a meeting, like someone's come in, we're interviewing someone or that kind of thing. And then I just get up and walk out of the meeting halfway through. And I'm like, this is like, what were you doing? You just got up and walked out of the meeting. I'm like, yeah, it was done for me. Like it's, and then after a few times she got it and then we chatted about it. And I guess without talking about all this, we understood my operating system. And it's like in my head, I know exactly the information that I need from the meeting. So when that's done, I'm gone mentally. I'm not in the room anymore anyway. So my physical body just gets up and leaves as well. And so now, and there was a point where she'd just tell people, oh, Ryan will probably leave halfway through the meeting. So don't be offended. And I'm like, yeah, don't be offended. Like, so that's a similar thing, right? Just understanding ourselves.
Yes, and that is also a beautiful example of front loading something. Ryan will probably get up and leave in the middle of the room, in the middle of the meeting, because for whatever reason. But that's also being okay with yourself and explaining to the outside world, this is my operating system, this is how I work. So don't be surprised if this happens, you
Yeah.
know?
Doesn't mean I don't like you.
No, no, and that helps other people. They understand.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. What
Articulation, that's just made me think articulation is often difficult for a lot of people with ADHD because so it's called a disorder. Okay, I don't see it as well, depends what you call disorder, but sometimes the order of things, we go A, J, Z, B. So sometimes things come out of our mouth differently to what they sounded in our head. So I think for a lot of people with ADHD, being able to explain that to people as well and say, okay, this is probably not going to come out in order, but let me just verbally process it is really helpful as well. So that again, just explaining to the outside world, and it makes it not about something that's wrong or shameful, but I just do things a bit differently from you. So just give me a minute to do that.
That's why working with a coach, I think, is so valuable and important because otherwise, like that guy who came in with the keys, we don't ever verbalize how we're processing things and what's happening. And so all we do is compare ourselves to other people and we feel shame and we beat ourselves up and we think, oh, I should be doing things differently. But if you can sit with someone who's genuinely wants to know, why is it that you trail off mid-sentence and they can actually work that out, then all of a sudden, it's out here now. I've verbalized it. The other person isn't looking at me like I'm a weirdo. They accept me and they want to understand how can we work with this and not, I guess, have shame or hate the behavior.
Yes, yes. And that, when you just said they accept me, is a really, really good point for people with ADHD. So I think that people with ADHD, most of their lives, for most of them, especially if you're with a lot of neurotypical people and you don't see other people with ADHD, I think they've been trying to fit in all of their lives. And so this kind of acceptance, like I remember saying to somebody last year, I've got this really cool filter right now. If I didn't used to have it, but these days I've got this really cool filter. If I meet somebody and all they see is my scatty side and they just take this perception, then they're probably not my people. Ciao, ciao. And I just, do you know what I mean? So people that judge you, whereas if people see and accept the scatty, they also see the genius, they see all of it and they accept all of you. Great. You don't have to change for anybody else. But I think that for a lot of people with ADHD, it's been that process of fitting in. And I always say, I don't know if you've seen Brené Brown's work, you probably have the fitting in versus belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And so fitting in means that you're assessing the world around you and going, how can I best reject myself to fit in and be perceived as normal by the world around me when that's not true belonging? So belonging is accepting ourselves and being belonging to ourselves and being in this environment where we can be ourselves completely and we just belong. There's no fitting in necessary.
Yeah, it's so freeing because if we ask the question like, who do I have to be accepted in this scenario? That's really hard because then I have to contort my true authentic expression. But then
Yes.
also every scenario and situation is different. So it's like I have to go to work and contort myself into someone different. I have to go home and contort myself into something else. Go out socially and contort myself. And all I'm doing is trying to morph into these different archetypes or characters, but none of them are true to who I am. And that's tiring. Like I've had clients like that who've been doing that for years and they're just exhausted. They don't want to do it anymore. They just don't know how to stop.
No, and that's the boundaries and the people pleasing and the self-acceptance, isn't it? The more that we have this, that probably takes me into that RSD piece as well. The higher our sense of self, the more we can work on, I'm okay with myself, no matter what's happening around me, and I'm okay to express what I need, then the higher value, you don't need your value from those around you. So that kind of sensitivity doesn't play into it and you don't feel like you have to fit in because you're okay with yourself.
What is rejection sensitivity dysphoria? Did I get that
Yeah,
right?
rejection sensitive dysphoria. So it really links in well to what we were just talking about. So RSD in the ADHD world. So William Dodson, he's a psychiatrist in the US. A few years ago, he coined this term. So rejection sensitive dysphoria. If you think every human being has this safety mechanism, and you guys will work with this a lot, right? So, am I going to be rejected? How's the world around me going to perceive me? If I sense that I'm psychologically unsafe, or I might be about to be psychologically unsafe, then I'm going to take actions or not take actions based on I don't want to be rejected. So I might go into people pleasing. I might not put my boundaries up. I might get defensive in a conversation. Somebody might say something and it might trigger this RSD. So it's like a built in safety mechanism. I think that the reason it was coined for people with ADHD is because rejection sensitivity is typically higher in people with ADHD. So, what that means is it triggers more easily. So, they feel rejected more easily. They feel constructive criticism, perceived or real, more deeply and worry about it more. The dysphoria, I'm not sure I like the term. I love that it's given people a common language. When I first heard RSD, I looked at it and I thought, what is that? And I was actually quite annoyed about it because I just thought that it might create learned helplessness. Because I thought if you're giving something this name and you're saying that it can only be fixed with medication that basically suppresses your emotions, then isn't that creating learned helplessness and not saying to people that they can develop out of it? And I had already been developing out of it for years before even knowing the term RSD, but working on raising that sense of self, the emotional regulation, the people pleasing, the boundaries. So the RSD piece, and I thought, well, I don't think that people were born with it. If people were born with RSD, wouldn't that mean that you'd get healthy babies who didn't dare try and walk? Because, I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to risk getting rejected.
Failing.
So,
Yeah.
right. So I think that it's an accumulation. People with ADHD in general, not everybody, but in general have a more sensitive nervous system. It's a bit like the trauma nervous system. I think it was Janina Fisher that said it kind of mimics the trauma nervous system in a lot of ways. And if you think we've got a more nervous sensitive sensitive nervous system, then we're going to perceive situations a bit more negatively. It's going to be a bit more, So then you've got added on to that the external world, who there's this beautiful, I think he's a psychologist in America, Ari Tuckman, and he summarized it perfectly. He said something like, for people with ADHD, it's always about pulling chestnuts out of the fire. It's always about these corrective experiences like, oh, I forgot this, or I didn't do this, or I'm overwhelmed. So you kind of add that external expectations into this internal sensitive nervous system. And I think that RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, just grows and grows and grows. It's like an accumulation of this safety mechanism that triggers and comes up. And if we don't know what's going on, then we just sit in a world of pain and suppress it or wait for it to pass. But what we do is we're also growing that kind of sense of shame and that sense of not good enough. So it's not until we start working on our boundaries and our people pleasing and the defensiveness and all the ways it manifests. It's kind of like the obstacle is the doorway. Those ways that it manifests are the ways that we can develop out of it.
Yeah. I think we all, experience acceptance and rejection in our formative years. But if we are more heightened with our emotional system and our nervous system, then we just feel rejection. Like rejection's a feeling, it's like,
Yeah.
if someone rejects me by saying, you're not a pink elephant, I'm like, I kind of laugh because I'm like, I know that I'm not. But like if somebody says, hey, you're doing that wrong, you're getting it wrong, why don't you do it right? Stop being so angry, stop having a tantrum, stop running around all the place. Then I feel, and if that's our caregivers, the people that we want acceptance and love from the most, and I'm feeling that on a consistent basis, it's like, and I feel it more intensely than other humans, then it's like, it's like a backpack of rejection that just grows and grows and grows over time. So no wonder we develop a sensitivity to it, because like we spoke about at the start of the show, we're constantly being told you're doing that wrong, stop doing that, all of that. And so pile on the fact that we're already sensitive to it, no wonder we develop this, what is now called RSD. But I guess we have to, all of those voices and feelings of rejection from other people, I guess, growing up become internalized, and then we're filled with shame because we reject ourselves. And so the way out of it,
yes,
the way out of it is to stop rejecting ourselves.
Yes, 100%. And that's what I always say. It's like honoring yourself first is one of the keys to developing out of it. And I think that RSD thing, it may not be our conscious belief, but it goes into our belief system. There's somewhere in our belief system in that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, or whatever it is to create that RSD. And I always say there's parts of us, right? There's a part of us that is confident, and I know I'm brilliant and I know all of this, but there's also a part of us that is that kind of ouch, that's just gone to that whatever happened or the accumulation of whatever happened. And that I think you did some work the other day around parts work, the internal family systems, and we all have, like, there's a part of us. So some people with ADHD, they won't recognize that RSD part at first because they'll say, well, that's not me, I am confident. And it'll be like, yeah, you are, but there's clearly a part of you that doesn't believe that. And I had a client in just last week, and it was very much part of that. And she said, she came in, what did she want to work on? It was something about strategy and tactics and why can't I get this done? And we sort of, within the first 10 minutes, she figured out, like, there's this underlying belief running underneath this. I said, so are we trying to still figure out this tactical thing? And she went, oh, I better work on the belief, hadn't I? Because without that, nothing will change.
Good on her, though. Good on her. So, well, do we have to look at this? There's something inherently wrong with me as a human being. It's like we have to unravel that, because if they're talking about parts, then we may start moving in a direction of, yes, I want A, B, C out of my life. I want to move in this direction. I know that I'm capable. I know that I'm confident. Look at me go. But then we'll start down that road, but it won't be long down that road that we get before that core belief comes up and goes, no, there's something wrong with you. That's okay for other people, but not for you. You're different. You do things incorrectly. And it pulls us back down, takes us off that road. So I wish it was easier, but unfortunately we have to look at the roots of that. There's something wrong with me in order to be free from it.
Absolutely. And imposter syndrome is a big one of those that just came up for me as you were saying that. And yeah, absolutely true. And it's like we have to work on an internal level and a tactical level at the same time, because the external tactical bit would be the people pleasing, the boundaries, the what are the incremental changes. But in turn, in doing that, by putting that beautiful boundary in place, you're actually saying, I value myself. And when we do it, it's quite liberating. And you can go, oh, I wasn't quite that hard and I didn't reject myself. So then your sense of self is growing.
Yeah.
And then eventually it becomes so much easier.
Yeah, you have those corrective experiences. That's like, pulling the chestnuts out of the fire from that analogy. When you do move through it, you do realize, oh, I've done that good, or you've had an interaction with another human being and you're like, that's fine. I don't feel less than. Then all of a sudden you can go, oh, what else is possible for me? Instead of, nothing else is possible. I know that you do a bit of a work with like emotional regulation and things with clients. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the role of emotional regulation that you see, like apart from what we've spoken about?
Oh gosh, it can be all sorts. So some people, I'm thinking of in the workplace, some people have emotional regulation issues in the workplace where they might be quite impulsive or they might be feeling emotional about something and they say it, but they convey it in not a good way. So it's almost like they're trying to put their boundaries in place, but it's not in such a skilled way, I could say. It's like you can do these things, but you can do it with more skill. So
I
it's like,
sometimes tell people it's like you got to learn this boundary thing, because like if someone's hasn't had boundaries at all, pretty much most of their life, then it's a very foreign concept. And so I know when I started setting boundaries, it would come. It's like the pendulum goes from one end to the other before it finds a happy
yes,
medium, and it goes from
yes.
no boundaries at all to, oh yeah, these are my fucking boundaries. No one can
Yeah.
anywhere near them.
How dare you?
I'm patrolling the gates of my boundary.
Yes, from passive to aggressive. And I've had a fair few clients actually come in that have got to the aggressive place and they're like, no, we need to find a
Yeah,
balance.
yeah.
So yeah, the emotional regulation can come in all different forms. It typically is kind of ruminating, overthinking, spiraling, shame spiraling. But it can also be in the form of things like impulsiveness and internet shopping and why do I spend this much money by the press of a button? And my ADHD self doesn't have that kind of internal regulator. And that's emotions, right? There's most things have emotions underneath them, even procrastination. There's usually always an emotional. I had a client the other day and she was saying, why can't I do these simple things on my task list? And I said, well, give me an example. And she had email so and so, it was a company name. I said, what comes up for you when you read that email so and so? She said, oh, she said, we had a case like this and we had 11 different people on it and it's technical experts and it was a new regulation that had come in. And she said, and it just, I feel all yucky. And I was like, aha, so it's not that you can't email the company, it's everything that comes up for you. So even that has emotions. And it's just like, okay, so how do we regulate and not have that happening? Would it be more helpful to you if you were to just say, get this document, attach it to blah, blah? She said, oh, that changes the game entirely because it took all the emotion out of it. So even the things that you wouldn't even think are emotional, most things with ADHD, there's some emotion attached somewhere. And our brains, so a neurotypical brain goes, that's important. I should do that. The neurochemicals all fire up and they go, do it. On importance, an ADHD brain says, that's important. I should do that. Oh, there's no gas in the tank. Why not? And sometimes actually reverse minus gas. So our brain is run on emotional stimulation, not importance. So it's like, is it positive stimulation? Is it negative stimulation? Those are the things that get us fired up. The downside to that is that those emotions can run a lot higher. You can go into hyperarousal, hypoarousal. So figuring out those emotional regulation pieces in session is really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I think that probably does come down to the sensitivity emotionally, because I think all human beings are driven emotionally. That's what pushes us away from things and towards other things. But I think if we can see like, oh, this is important, but I had this yucky experience with a company in the past, the importance kind of overrides the yuckiness and we can kind of move forward. Whereas if I have the really heightened nervous system, the yuckiness is the number one on the priority list. It's the thing that we're trying to
Yes.
avoid feeling again. And so that's why emotional
Yeah.
regulation, I think, is so important.
Yeah, definitely. And I wrote an article on procrastination because people think that procrastination is like a task-based problem or a motivation problem, but there's so much science on the different brain parts and what's active and what's not active, and why it's more difficult for people with ADHD because the emotions generally are bigger.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the link between, in your opinion, between trauma and ADHD? You get some people coming out and saying like, trauma or ADHD is a response to trauma or the cause of it. Like, what's your opinion on this topic?
The controversial Mr. Gavel Mate just arose in my mind.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Yeah, was it? I remember reading Scattered Minds many years ago, and I myself just thought, oh, that doesn't make sense. But then years later, there was so much in it that did make sense to me. But so what's my thoughts on ADHD and trauma? Well, the systems are very similar. I have most of my clients, whether they know it or not, have probably had some kind of childhood developmental trauma, depending on your definition of trauma, right? So
Yeah,
to me, trauma is anything that adapts the system. So trauma to me can be something that wasn't even a trauma to the external world, but it made you feel like crap and it adapted your system to protect itself to no longer have that feeling, say. So yeah, trauma to me is something that adapts your system. It's a trauma to the system, no matter how small or large. So the overlap of trauma and ADHD, I think that a lot of people with ADHD have experienced an accumulation of small traumas. The going back to the Gabor Mate, now I can't be certain, my great working memory, I think that in his book he says something about he thinks that it's genetic, hereditary, but it's switched on if you don't have proper attachment. Or and when I
epigenetically, yeah.
first yeah, and when I first read that book, I thought, what do you mean don't have proper attachment? But again, it's your perception, right? So when I first read that, I thought, I've got attachment with my children. What are you talking about? But then when you actually delve deeper, he's saying his version of attachment is even to the point of a mother breaking eye contact with their child. That can even be a lack of attachment. And who on earth, what mother has never broken eye contact first with their child? So if you don't take it personally, if you take his theory of it, you think, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where it came from. The ADHD and trauma overlap, I think, is very strong in RSD because I think that RSD is created by some kind of trauma. Because going back to that example that I said of you don't see babies, healthy babies that can walk or that have the propensity to walk, you don't see them going, I feel shame, I'm going to get rejected, right? Shame develops at, you'll know this better than me, probably 2 or 3 or something like that.
Yeah, at least. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably a
So
little bit older than that.
yeah, and I know that they say that there's a higher rate of ADHD in things like prisons and children's homes. But going back to that, what I spoke about earlier, that environmental piece, I wonder if it just shows up more strongly in places like that because they don't have the connection, the belonging, all of those things that would not make the impairments or the ADHD symptoms so prevalent.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an interesting topic, and I think we're so multifaceted as human beings. There's so much going on, and it's so complex, not just this, but many things. Is that whenever something comes out that's very black and white, it makes people either latch onto it or discount it. And so whether it's saying, and I don't agree with Gabor, I love his work and he's a great orator, but I don't agree with him on this. But to say that, ADHD is a result purely of trauma, I think is incorrect. I
Agreed.
also think it's incorrect, though, on the other side of the spectrum to say this is something we're born with and something that, we have to manage or medicate for the rest of our life. And that's just the hand that we've been dealt. I think there is a massive overlap because of what we've spoken about. A more heightened nervous system is more susceptible to emotional imprints, trauma, undigested life experiences, whatever word you want to use. Like that, we were talking about a core shame identity of there's something wrong with me. That's a developmental trauma, in our
Yeah.
opinion. Now, you can call it something different. That's just a word. But
Yeah.
basically, we have had people in our community, a lot of people read a lot of this different stuff and go, well, I start doing this healing work and addressing my, childhood. will all of my ADHD go away? And I've been seeing this for many, many years. My answer is no, but you have a very, very different relationship to yourself and the traits of ADHD. And what you'll find is, you no longer think that there's something wrong with you. You no longer feel like you have to reject yourself or you worry about the rejection of other people. You can embrace your quirkiness. You can embrace the fact that you can lose your keys 3 times today, but also do the work in 2 hours that would take someone else 12 hours. You can embrace all that. So it'll happen. And this is the same with anything. When we change our relationship with ourselves and certain parts of ourselves, we change our life and the way that we operate. That's what I've seen.
Totally. And I think for me, there's parts of ADHD that can be changed. Like when I went through and did my mindfulness, my qualification, my learning, all of that stuff, that part for me, the emotional regulation completely changed. My little sister came out to see me in Australia from England and said, "Oh my God, Jen, you used to be quite impatient and judgmental, like you're a completely different person." I said, "I'll take that as a compliment in my new skin." But no, what I'm saying is I was still the same person, but my physiology even changed through doing all of this mindfulness stuff years ago. I was probably the person that came into the room going, "What are they talking about?" And it just annoyed me. The whole process annoyed me, but I stuck with it. I did it. And then my physiology changed to the point of being quite a road rager to, "Oh, this is my me time in this traffic." And it wasn't something that I had to consciously think. It honestly is how my system felt. So I think that there's certain aspects of ADHD, like the emotional regulation, whether you call it ADHD or a lower tolerance or whatever it is, I think there's certain aspects that you can change. But I think that there's other certain aspects, like for me, my working memory, sorry, don't know how to get better at that one. But so it's a process of, again, it's that kind of acceptance of what do I want to really work on? What's hitting my head against a brick wall versus acceptance. So yeah, I think in answer to yours, will it get rid of their ADHD? No, it's a system that and agree with you, I don't think it's caused by trauma, because otherwise how would it be so hereditary?
Yeah, I've noticed one.
Of course, you're talking about what's the word? Generational trauma. So I don't know about that one.
Yeah. I mean that is another element as well. It's like, if you think of maybe some people with ADHD have hypervigilance in any situation. And so, but if an ancestor had to be hypervigilant a lot of the time in an unsafe environment, that can be passed down, genetically. One thing for me on hypervigilance is I used to, anytime I was in a public place, I would scan the environment and I would feel a high level of hypervigilance. Like I've got to be, aware of what's, something potentially bad about to happen, but I would feel it viscerally very much in my system. Whereas now I don't feel hypervigilance anymore, but I do notice myself when I walk in, say, a cafe or a shopping center. I'll notice I quickly scan everybody's face, even if it's hundreds of people. I'll quickly scan. I think that's me just trying to pick up on the emotional states or cues of everyone else. But the feeling of hypervigilance, that visceral feeling, has completely gone. So it's like certain things may remain, certain things may change, but I think once again, it's that accepting ourselves. It's that moment that we finally realize, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I process things a bit differently. I have a more sensitive nervous system. And then we can look at it and go, oh, that sucks. I don't want a more sensitive nervous system. But it also means you're able to do really cool work. I mean, people with highly sensitive nervous systems tend to become artists, comedians, musicians, people who can take this outside world that we live in and convey it into beautiful art. And that's normally someone with a sensitive nervous system that can do that. So it's a gift as well as having its troubles.
Oh, 100%. And I think if you've got a more sensitive nervous system, and there is some research actually, I think it was Tom something, and he talked about orchids. And he said orchids are people that are highly sensitive people. And he talked about how in negative environments, they will fare much worse. But if raised in positive environments, they actually came out higher than, say, a neurotypical or a not as sensitive system. So again, it's so environmental. And I think that the sensitivity can also lead people to be incredibly emotionally intelligent and perceptive.
Yeah. And it's funny as well. Like I'm just thinking about where I am now, and I live in a house that's like really quiet, and I've like just got trees and stuff. I'm on a big block, and it's like I think I've tried to just naturally lower the sensory input of my environment.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, when you said about walking into the cafes, is there, you've done so much work on yourself that there's no longer that feeling of unsafe when you
Yeah,
walk into a cafe?
yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
I still check out everyone. Check out sounds like a bad word. This is like, you checking out that girl, but trust me, I'm checking
Have
out
you
every.
told Melissa?
Yeah, yeah, she knows. You checking out that girl, but then I'm checking out every human being in the area. You spend a little bit more time on that girl over there.
Oh, scan
um,
the environment,
Square the
observe.
environment, yeah, yeah. But as I said, the unsafe feeling, has dissipated, which is really cool. So, yeah, I'd encourage anybody who might be listening to this, whether it's yourself or someone who you think like maybe having ADHD or neurodiversity or something, is to reach out. Have you got any resources you can point people to, Jen, or any of your stuff?
Well, what I would say for coaching is that there is a website called ADHD Coaches Australasia. So if anybody is thinking about coaching, that's the one website where you will find, because coaching is not a regulated industry, right? So, and anybody can call themselves any type of coach, but that's the one website that's yeah, it's the one where people have to be qualified, they have to be trained, so they can't just hop onto this directory. I don't know about other directories, but that's the one that goes out to most psychiatrists and that gets given out. So if anybody's thinking about coaching, and yeah, I mean, resources, I could give you 1,000 resources, but with the Attitude magazine's always a great one. That's really, really helpful. There's some great resources in there, but that might be one of those times, Ryan, where I'd got written be more specific.
Ah,
Because when you said that, and for a person with ADHD, I think sometimes if there's no prompts or specifics, our brain goes in about 20 different directions.
yeah. No, you've given two great resources there. What about if people want to follow along with you? How do they do that?
So jluhq.com is my website. I'm terrible at social media because there's 1,000 other things to do. I do have a Facebook page. I think it's called ADHD Coach Jen or jluhq.com. I'm not Instagram. I'm probably might one day be a bit better at that. But I do run courses, and I'm running an RSD course in May or June. That has been a long time in the making. Oh, you knew that. You knew about that. But that's probably my main passion as well, is to help people with that RSD piece, because it affects something like 98% of people with ADHD, and it's a game changer. So I'm definitely going to be running an online course to help people understand, what is it, where does it come from, how does it manifest in you personally, and more importantly as well, how can we develop that sense of getting out of it? Because I don't think that that's something that's widely, with RSD, most people come out with, what are the symptoms? And we kind of already know what the symptoms are and we can relate, but it's like, okay, what do we do with that now? And I think it is possible. I've done it myself, and I'm probably 80 to 90% different from what I was with RSD. It still hits, but it's probably about twice a year, like in a big way. And I know what's happening and I know how to get myself through it versus hitting weekly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'll link to your website, and then just let us know once the courses do come out, and we maybe can jump back on and talk about it, or help promote it,
Yeah,
and go from
cool. It
there.
sounds wonderful. Oh, thank you
Uh,
so much.
that's all right. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been
You're like a
super fun.
seasoned pro at the podcasting.
I'm not. My second one, but I probably do better just speaking off the cuff, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's the way
yeah,
to do it. All right, thank you
yeah.
everybody for tuning in and listening. You'll see Jen's details on her website down below in the show notes. We hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll see you on the next one.